All right, we are back on Play It Forward with Sammy Zeisel, filmmaker, director. Sammy, thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Awesome. We are talking about clambake today. And yeah, before we do, I would love to know a little bit about your background or the film, if you'd like to set it up, you name it.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, I grew up in on the East Coast, Bethesda, Maryland. But I also grew up going to Cape Cod every summer, which is where the film takes place. And particularly the house that you see in the film is a house that I grew up going to every summer with my family. I I'm come from the theater world first and foremost. I grew up. My mom is a children's theater director, and so theater has been a part of my life forever. And then, but I've also loved movies, and more recently, filmmaking has started to become another part of my creative practice, and almost more something that is something that's growing and gaining on the theater part of my life as well, or at least let's say they work in tandem with each other. They both fill different parts of me artistically. Um, the genesis of the film, I would say, came out of my dad passed away about 6 months before the pandemic started. So at this point, about 4 years ago, and uh, I guess the seed of the film came from going back to this house, this place that I'd grown up going to with my family, and for the first time after he was gone, and really feeling his absence so profoundly myself, and also like feeling his absence in my family. And when you grow up going to a place every year with your family, there are rituals and there are all kinds of things that become markers of time. And when someone's gone, uh, those rituals are suddenly different, and time is marked differently. And so I just beginning to become aware of that. It felt like that was the seed of this film. That feeling, being in a place where where someone's absence is so present, I guess, really is the seed of the film. And I ended up collaborating with a playwright friend of mine. Her name is Beth Hyland, who's an amazing writer who actually wrote the film. But in collaboration with me and the woman who plays the lead in the film, Maya, her name is Ella Pennington, who's also my fiance, and the three of us,
Congrats.
kind of over the beginning of the
So
pandemic, because I
cool.
think we connected and we were like, let's make a film set in this place. And we actually all ended up kind of putting our families into this movie. My fiance Ella, who plays Maya, she's from a family of three sisters, so that ended up being in the movie. Beth, who is the writer, she comes from an only family, but her mother came from a family of three sisters, and whose mother died when they were very young. So it became a movie about, that's not about, but a movie that held the memories of her mother in it in many ways. So the story came from this kind of collective um, sort of effort to understand grief and within our families. Yeah.
That's beautiful. It's so, you said a couple things that are really inspiring. I guess first and foremost, not even what you said, what you've done, this exploration and how you've done it with, um, other creative people or creators, close people that are all taking a look together at how grief has been processed through generations in their family and the different ways that we as humans respond to grief, and some respond, some react, and all of the above together. And the couple of things that you said, that really stuck out to me. One was someone's absence is so present. That's such a wonderful way of putting it, because it's like, well, there's something very spiritual about that, in terms of the absence now becomes the presence. and is there a difference in a way?
Yeah.
Because the presence is a positive thing, like it's there, right? So now it's just kind of the inverse, and the person is still there in some capacity. And the other thing, I really appreciate they said is that it's the creative practice, the creative practice. And I think it's so important to iterate over and over again that, that's the focus of what artists do. And then everything else is kind of secondary, whether you're making a living based on that creative practice or not. You're making something that is, arguably more important than a living doing that creative practice. And one of those things that you're doing is understanding your humanity. And so the first question to play it forward is, well, all right, where did the inspiration come from? But you've already really shared that, in terms of it came from your life and your loss with your father recently. 4 years is, still pretty recently.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess was that is that where the inception of the idea came from, and revisiting this house, and then kind of all the other things were strung together after that?
Yeah. I mean, it
Yeah,
did it. That's the seed. I think there
yeah,
were,
yeah.
obviously, I don't come from a family of three sisters.
Sure, sure.
And so I guess what was beautiful was the way that maybe that was the seed, but then um, the other collaborators putting their hearts and their vulnerability into it.
Yeah.
That's how the story came
Right,
about. The
right,
story
right, right.
came from a entanglement between different personal, you know, uh, revelations, I guess you could say. And then
Sure.
the story was, secondary or tertiary, from those sort of emotional things that we were all like genuinely processing together.
I
I
see what you're saying. By tertiary, you mean it came out of the process
It came
of
out of
processing.
those
Yeah,
feelings and those
yeah,
conversations, and the
yeah,
story
yeah,
revealed itself in that way. I,
yeah,
I guess you could say. I think
yeah.
there were some other seeds that were in the pot, or ingredients in the pot, if you keep the
Sure.
metaphor going.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
the Chekhov's Three Sisters, the play.
Uh-huh.
Um, only in that,
I'm not familiar with it. I've heard of it, of
um,
course, but I've never seen it or
the
read it.
great play, and
Yeah,
because me and Ella and Beth all come from the theater world, we share a lot of theater references, and
sure.
particularly all love the playwright Chekhov, for his blend of always tragedy and humor, which I think makes its way into the tonal world of this play, and really, this film, and pretty much everything that the three of us do. But we also kind of turned to Three Sisters. It's a play that starts with three sisters a year after their father has died. And so just kind of from that, we did start from with a little bit of that in our heads as well.
Mhm,
But that was
mhm,
just a nice kind of uh, formal jumping off point.
mhm.
More important were the sort of emotional things that all three of us wanted to put in here. I guess I'd also add that, like, the place was really wanting to capture. You said there's something spiritual about a present absence. For me, it's like that existed in that space, and something that you can't do in theater really is have place be a character in the same way that you can in film. So that, theater and film are good for different things, and what's beautiful about getting to do both of them is to find what needs to be expressed in the theater and what needs to be expressed on film.
Yeah,
But what's been really beautiful as I started to become a filmmaker is being like, there is something that exists in this place that can only be captured if we're there. And so a lot of the genesis for me was just filming this house that
yeah,
had this present absence
yeah, yeah,
there.
yeah.
I sometimes I felt like all we need to do is film a window, and it was like, oh, that's about grief. I mean,
Hmm, hmm.
and obviously the story needed to play out, but finding those moments for that, what I would say, for the spiritual quality of the film to um, make itself known, I think we had to just film this place.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
that's a great point. I mean, it is a great character. It's a beautiful house, and the way you guys shot it is definitely done in a beautiful way. There's a lot of still soft moments with just the natural sounds and images of this place. And it definitely connotes its own kind of character for sure. Beautiful images. The next question to play it forward is really, well, what's the message? What's the takeaway? How do we as human beings, reflect on what we're seeing, a storyline of these three people processing grief and the different ways they do it and how they come apart and how they then come together, and how does that reflect on all of us? If we haven't processed grief yet, we will. And I'm sure, all of us have, whether it's, our first loss of X, whether it's the stuffy, as they call them nowadays, or pet or whatever it is. Stuffy is another word for a stuffed animal, right? So whatever that is, it happens young and it keeps happening over and over again. And I think, how do you read the film as a narrative,
mhm.
and what's your takeaway from it? How can we best process grief as humans?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always like hesitant to, I want people to experience it and take away, what they take away from
Of
it.
course,
Especially
of
because
course.
I think if there is a message, so much of it is that, about how there is no right way to process grief and there's no way to solve it. So if there is something that I would hope someone would take away, it would be to um, is that grief has to work its way through you. It has to, it has to change you, and it has to change your family, and it has to change you. I mean, it has to change you forever, and you can't control it, and you can try to control it, but you're not going to be able to. And the character, especially of Maya, who really feels like she feels that she might be able to do it right, you know. And it's something that I know that I felt, and I think most people who have gone through grief might be searching for the right way to do it. And ironically, that's something, the one thing you can't really do. You have to allow loss to happen, and fortunately, you have to let loss be a thing you then will always have. um the line, there's a really key line, which is, I don't know if I want to spoil it, but there's a very key line, which is, I believe, maybe we have to be a little bit sad forever.
Yeah, I
um
wrote it down. I
yeah,
just think we have to be a little sad forever. Yeah,
I just think we have to be a little bit sad forever.
yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, and I don't, and it's, and that's okay. And she doesn't, I think there was an original draft of the script where she said something like, and I think we can do that, but we didn't need that second half because we know they can do that. If you can say that, you can do that. And it's okay to be a little bit sad forever. In fact, it's necessary. And it's actually a gift. Loss is a gift. So yeah, that's what I feel. Yeah, it's something
Yeah,
you get to have in life.
it's something you get to have.
Yeah,
It's
it's one of the things life will give you, and you can accept it, um, with other people, and it gives you access to a more truthful way of understanding life, because it is a huge part of it, and it is sad, but it's not just sad. Yeah, so something like that.
That's pretty
Uh,
good. That's great.
Something like that. That's what I take away, I
It's
guess.
beautiful. Thank you. That's one of the special things about having the creators on the show and talking about creators um, and the creation together, is because you have had the good fortune of being able to dive deeply into this landscape and into the themes of the landscape. And you are coming up from the depths with gold, treasure. And so you have these treasures to offer us from your unique vantage point. And as we, in our limited time, if we could, sit with this movie maybe for 10 hours, and watch it over and over and over and over again. But I think what you've shared with us really helps us feel it. And I think it's all there in the film, it's all there in the film. Certainly I love the novelty of kind of the idea of the main character, thinking she's processing it as a way to do work, and that's, fine. But I think there's some, feeling that everybody's got to do it this way, and however everybody does it, they do get to the same point. That's hopefully the goal, is that they get to that point where they allow it in, like you said, and able to see that vantage point into life, from that special place that you're talking about, that is more truthful about who we are and what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing all that with us.
Yeah.
Really, really important. And the last question is, since making clam bake, and I think we got to include a recipe for how to do a clam bake, because I was like, what? You can actually cook shit in the sand?
Look,
That's
I've
amazing.
actually, that was not one of the rituals I did.
Oh
I,
no.
I
Okay.
actually, that was a totally, that came in through Beth, through the playwright, the
Super
writer.
cool. Wow.
It is a really interesting and a really beautiful process, actually, that we had
Yeah.
to learn about through making the film. So it is
Yeah,
real.
how
Do
to. I want to how to,
it.
because I was like, oh. But yeah, the last question is, really, after going through this thing, this ordeal of
Mhm.
filmmaking, which is, it's a wonderful journey, with that is also an ordeal. It's, as anybody's ever made a short film, or, they know it's, quite the process. How have you been personally changed after making Clambake?
It was a collective experience of processing grief. That was really, and as you say, the practice, the process is really what we do it for, and this was really an embodiment of that, because what I'll always have more than the film really is the memory of the experience of us all going to that house together, and specifically going right after COVID. We shot it right after we all got our first vaccines, and it's easy to even forget about that moment, but this moment where we suddenly felt that we could be in safely in a space together. Many of us had not been in a space with more than 3 people in a year when we shot this movie, and suddenly we were a film crew in that house. And so it's that experience. I mean, there was a lot of grief that we were all processing from that year, and also our whatever our own personal relationship to this film was. There were actors who had lost parents, for whom this is what this movie became about. That there were, everyone has their loss, and just doing the film was, I think, this extraordinary experience of processing that together and turning that into something, turning it into art, turning it into communion,
Yeah.
into joy, and even into work. It's not always joy, but even turning grief into something into something creative, into something
Right.
that makes something
Yeah.
for other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
I think was something that that's what I'll have. I'll have that. I'll have the movie as a document of that
Right.
experience. And I hope other people who worked on it, the whole team, will also think, I can't say, but I think that many of them will feel that way about it as well.
It's awesome, Sammy. I love
Mm-hmm.
that communion, the
Mm-hmm.
process of grief, and processing it through communing and turning it into something that has light and a new beginning. And it's blending death and life and creation and destruction all into this, continuous kind of a stream. So it's a beautiful thing. Thank you for doing it. Thanks for being here and talking about it and helping us reflect on our shared humanity. Sammy Zeisel, filmmaker, director. The movie is Clambake. Until next time, everybody, play it forward. We are out. Sammy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a really great experience to get to talk about this again.
You're super kind. Thank you. All right, we're out, everybody.